Sagon. Hello, I'm Kelly Lynn D'Angelo, your moderator for today's amazing panel. You might have seen me around as the DM for GGG. I'm Phalor on Sirens of the Realm. I have a new exciting project coming up, and I write on a lot of shows, but enough about me. Really excited to be here with an amazing panel of DMs. We're all here, D&D Celebration 2020. We're just here to celebrate this amazing community and this amazing game that we all love. So let's go around. I'm going to throw it to each one of you. We have Travis McElroy. You probably know him from the Adventure Zone.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Travis McElroy.
Moving down the line, we got B. Dave Walters, Victor on LA by Night, as well as Marcid, I believe, on Pirates of Leviathan, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true. It is I, B. Dave Walters, and I will be here as your stunt, Travis McElroy.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very
much. Speaking of Pirates of the Leviathan, we have Brennan Lee Mulligan, your GM, your master of both Dimension 20 and Pirates.
Hello! Oh my goodness, it's so good to be here.
Are you surprised to be here? You knew you were going to be here, right?
I turned my computer on and all these nice people were in it. What the heck is going on?
I hacked his webcam. Nobody tell him.
Oh, I hope I know what we're all talking about.
And now moving down, I think the competition of beards is over. I'm gonna introduce Satine Phoenix, the amazing DM and GM, GM Tibbs, Gilding Lights, Sirens of the Realms, artist extraordinaire, Satine.
Yay. Hi, guys.
And last but not least, the illustrious Deborah and Woll, Lost Odyssey, Relics and Rarities, and General Television.
Hello. Yes, I enjoy my job in General Television.
Is it like a military ranking? I feel like you've earned the rank of
General Television
by now.
I don't know. As a television writer, at some point you just say, and all of it.
And all television.
Yes. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. You're all so amazing. That list of accolades was both exciting to list and also a little bit threatening, because I'm just sitting here like, wow, what an amazing group of people. Are they going to make me roll 20? Like, I'm just excited to be here. I cannot wait.
I barely make my players roll dice. Don't worry.
That is true, isn't it? Storytellers, maybe that's a great place to kind of start off. And I just want to keep throwing some questions at you guys, just so we can have a great kind of tete-a-tete, throw in whatever sort of dad jokes you wish. The channel is open for communication. But I'm curious about that. Why don't we just start with that conversation and that question with you guys, which is, are you really, as DMs, as storytellers, as dungeon masters, do you guys rely heavily on dice rolls? Always stick into the guns of the dice when you roll that D20? Or do you guys sometimes kind of find flexibility within your storytelling? And Travis, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, just because you opened up that question.
Oh, boise. It's really tough. This is a thing that I have talked with many, like, feels weird to say, but professional DMs about. It's like when you're doing it for an audience, you're not just like playing the game, you're also telling a story, and you have to find a balance, which I still am trying to, I think you should constantly be trying to find that balance where like you're crafting a narrative that is interesting for the audience, but also honoring the fact that you're playing the game, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you have to find ways for both of those to kind of benefit each other without taking away from each other. So like, this is something we found pretty early on in Adventure Zone, where it's like, well, if a story thing is interrupted by a failed dice roll, that can be frustrating, not only for the players, but for the audience. So we're trying to find advancement through choices while still incorporating the game mechanics for like the adventure aspects. So like it's a really, I think, a tricky thing to find, because that doesn't happen if you're like writing a novel.
100%.
You know what I mean?
No, that's the power of the game, isn't it? Is that each DM can make those calls. And it is like within a book, there are mechanics. What about you, B. Dave? I see a thinking face going on.
Well, for me, I'm definitely trying to tell a story first and foremost, and the dice represent an element of chance. For the most part, I try and resolve as many things narratively as possible. And usually when I'm asking for a role, it is still generally to the player's benefit. Like the character may know something you don't know, but I will know when we did We're Live Frontier, the way we balanced that out was because we had a full set of 6 people, and basically what it came down to is the dice are the 7th person. So just like everyone sort of needs their moment to shine, the dice also need their moment to shine, and that kind of keeps things rolling.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. How do you feel about that, Satine or Deborah? Do you guys also stay very strict to the dice rolls, or do you guys is there any other sort of flexibility you do within that storytelling?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's all about risk, right? And I want them to make choices. So the more choices they have to make, the more I want it to be complicated. And I want them to be afraid of it. I mean, that's just me. So I might have us roll off a lot, or I might make them roll like 3 different things for a situation to resolve. But I might actually cheat my dice to kind of manipulate the bigger story to give them a better feeling of the momentum of the story. So I might actually take the story up, crank up the dice rolls, crank up the fear, and then pull back a little bit if I notice that they're getting a little bit too emotional about it. I feel like I'm telling my secrets.
Manipulating dice rolls. No,
That's the thing. You're the dungeon master. You're the storyteller, and sometimes failure is a powerful thing, and sometimes success is a powerful thing. Do you feel strongly about that as well, Deborah?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think to me there are no bad rolls, because even it's just a low roll. So a low roll is just more storytelling. So I think I agree that it's all about how can you use the dice rolls to add to story rather than take away from it? So instead of like stopping the game to roll initiative, how do we roll initiative within narrative? So, if it's like, all right, and then the monster attacks. Okay, I want every one of you to roll initiative. And while they're rolling, I'm still paying out what's happening. So I'm still talking and I'm still keeping it going. And then even things of like, sometimes I might roll certain things ahead of time, so that if I do feel like it's going to make a big pause in the game, I've pre-rolled random encounters or things like that, so we can just kind of keep moving through them. But it's also about reading the room. Some groups really love to roll dice and be in it and be really specific and technical, and others kind of don't care as much. So like, I don't want to stop the game for climbing a mountain when the DC is only a 10, I might just say it's really hard, but you do it, But others want to be like, no, I want the story of climbing that mountain and when I slip and have to grab onto the thing. But I think I like to do the rolls per the game for the most part. But when a negative roll happens, play it up just as big as I would for a high roll.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's as much a part of story as the low rolls. And sometimes those are the greatest moments, and you can make them a little funny,
Yeah. People forget that.
Instead of yes and, it's no but.
Exactly.
Both of those things can move forward. Like, that doesn't happen. And you've, rolled into this explosive situation that now you have to deal with.
Find your way out of.
We have
my story.
Yes. What a perfect transition, because if we're talking about yes and no but, Brennan, you are the master of improv. I actually knew you prior to all this from the improv community. So can you speak a little bit further on improv and D&D? Can you give us your insight on that?
First of all, everyone said such brilliant stuff. So all I'm going to do is confirm. That would be great.
Brennan's just happy to be here.
You're doing it. We're seeing him and. Bravo, master.
Oh, shucks. Everyone's being very sweet. But no, it's extremely true. To affirm what everyone said, first of all, love what Deborah said about specifically, there is nothing low or high, it's all story. And to Dave's point about this is the 7th collaborator at the table, your dice are your best writing partner. So to zoom out from this question for a second, I think we should look at the connection to improv and yes and also why involve dice in your storytelling at all? You could just do free form collaborative storytelling. So I think that we have to say, even if you are playing at a very rules light table, why did we involve dice in the first place? And I think if you're honoring the dice at your table, you're going, we want to know that one of the collaborators in our story is a non-sentient, inhuman polyhedron, because that presents honest risk and danger. Because as long as the only collaborators are my friends, I will always know their inherent bias is towards my personal joy and well-being. And for
Well, sometimes that's true. I play.
Yeah, this is a
I
humble
play
brag
with my
about-
brothers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a definite humble brag that I surround myself with people who care about me. But so, I'm sorry about that. But the interesting thing is that dice really are in many ways this improviser on the stage with you that actually can't say and. It's sort of a fun, you're doing an improv scene where one of the collaborators is just like, here's a number, right? And I think your job as a dungeon master is honestly, like, I feel like dice are like an old writing partner that I've been working with for my whole life. And it's almost like an odd couple thing where, like, oh, my buddy Dice, they can be very blunt and they're not always super constructive in their feedback, but they mean well. And so it's my job, the dice are like—
I'm curious about that, Brennan. I want to stop on that really, really shortly, because that's such great advice, but so many people starting off in D&D are so scared of the improv element, and you have coaxed it into that so strongly, and you really do, you really know about how to dance between those worlds. So as somebody who's maybe scared or nervous about improvising within that space, do you have some advice for folks who want to step into exactly what you're talking about?
Yes, I think, well, first of all, on a practical level, there's a ton of great improv resources. And for people that are watching this that are maybe only familiar with the tabletop world and aren't familiar at all with improv, there's a bunch of great resources online and videos to just look at long form improv, which is a comedic tradition that comes out of like Second City and the Compass Players in Chicago, about basically doing improvised theater and storytelling. It should be obvious to anyone who's had like a great character moment at the table why that skill set might be complementary to storytelling in tabletop role playing and in Dungeons and Dragons specifically. That being said, when you're looking at how to involve elements of improv in your game and in your play style with you and your friends, especially if you're a dungeon master running stuff at the table, I think it's exactly what Deborah already said of that idea of there is no success or failure. And Kelly, we had an awesome conversation a couple weeks ago where we referenced this old Zen parable that it's like a very famous parable about, like, a young boy on a farm breaks his leg, and his father says, "Oh no, my son's leg, it's terrible." And the Zen master says, "We'll see." And then a draft officer comes and conscripts all these young men except for the boy that has his broken leg. And the father says, "Look at how good that is. This is so good." And the Zen master says, "We'll see." That principle of failure or success, good or bad, are temporary elements of a story that will continue, is the best improv advice I can give to a dungeon master, where your job when the dice dictate success or failure is to jump in as the dice like more diplomatic buddy, and be like, the dice are very adamant that this is a success or failure. Let me spin this into the continuation of the story as we move forward.
Now,
it scares the hell out of me.
I need to know how other people feel about that, because I'm just so curious. Like, how do y'all feel about that?
Just the word improv freaks me out. But because I like writing scripts and comics, what I do know is character interaction and hierarchy of needs within a situation. So if I know my character or the NPC and my player knows theirs, I can respond based on my needs with them. So if you're like me and improv really makes you shake, that is another way to think about it. Every scenario has a conflict. One person wants something, the other person wants another thing or the same thing, and the resolution is how they get that. So I guess that's improv also.
Yeah.
But the
That's
word
the
makes me
tools.
cringe.
Yeah.
That's the tools of dice, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that's the point. When you roll, it dictates that. Deborah, do you have thoughts on that
Wait,
too?
I was gonna say, so I'm not an improviser, but my husband is for like 20 years. So I have seen amazing improv, terrible improv, all over the map. And my feeling is that the dice is almost like new choice, you know? So it's you're playing along and you've got this idea of a story, and then you roll the dice and the dice says, no, go that way. And I think if you're not an improviser or even an actor, it's about trusting your gut and knowing that you've read a lot of stories, you've seen a lot of you know what is fun, you know, and if you just kind of, when that happens and you said, well, I had this plan, we were gonna, you know, go into the woods, but the dice is saying they can't get in the woods because they can't cross the river because it's too hard. Well, all right, maybe it's about following the bank, you know, and just let that happen and trust your gut that you will know that they're gonna be brilliant and they're gonna say something that makes you go, oh, great. Yes, there's a tree that fell across the river, you know, and you'll find another way around it. So yeah, trusting yourself and letting the dice just be an exciting way to like level up and say, try something else.
That's
And
fundamental
I
play,
think-
isn't it? That's
Yeah,
the play
just
that
like you were
I
when you
love
were a
that.
kid and you just played. It's exactly that. And I would try to put yourself in the mindset of being, you know, 6 to 12 again. And, you know, what is that space that allows you to be really free and just say, okay, great. Well, I want to jump up to the top of it. It's 20 feet. I don't care. Let's try, you know, it's cool.
Yes,
And I think-
Travis, you have inner child. Continue, please.
Yes.
I think
Yes, I
you know
do.
that very well.
I the thing about it too is I think Dave, you also said earlier, like the element of chance, right? Of like, that's one of the things I really like about it is otherwise, right? If you had a strong character, right? It'd be like, okay, yeah, you want to arm wrestle that guy, you win, right? That's not interesting or fun.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's like, okay, let's see how strong he is versus you. Like now there's an element of conflict instead of just saying like, well, you're strong enough to always do it. Because that's the thing is like in real life, you know, it doesn't matter how many times you've done a thing, right? It's like accidents happen and good stuff happens and all of that. And having that element of like, I'm going to try stuff. There are some moments in Tiny Heist that Brendan DM'd where it was like everything has been building to this moment and a lot rides on this dice roll. And that is where like the excitement comes from.
Yeah.
Of just like, we all want this to work, but it might not. It's not a guaranteed success just because we've planned it. Because in real life, that's how it works. You know, sometimes no matter how much you plan, stuff doesn't work.
I was going to say, jumping off of that, D&D has helped me a lot restructure kind of the way I think about my own successes and failures in life. So if I go on a bad meeting and I walk out and I go, oh my God, we didn't connect, I didn't say the right things, I was such a dork or whatever it was, normally I would just beat up on myself and go, oh, you should have done better. But instead I go, look, my charisma is a +7, right? That's just true. And every time I work on it, I level up a little bit, right? But today I rolled low. So it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with me. There was a chance, and I could have rolled high and added +7, but instead I rolled a 2, and it's only a 9. It doesn't change the fact that I'm charismatic. So and that applies to other aspects of my life if that has to do with intelligence or wisdom or dexterity or strength. All of those things. You can kind of. It's been helpful for me as maybe a more insecure person to think of myself like a character sheet in some way.
It's funny that you say that because one of the things I've explained to people recently when they're like, you know, how did you do this? How did you do that? I'm like, I've just rolled a lot of crits at opportune times.
Yeah.
But my own hard work allowed me to roll with advantage. Like that's literally how I explain it to people.
For sure.
You know, I will just say also regarding the dice thing, when I play D&D, I only have one house rule, that a 1 always fails and a 20 always succeeds, even on skill checks, because that's what simulates the hole in one, you know, in life. Right. That you're never so good you cannot fail. You're never so hopelessly outmatched you cannot succeed. And that's exciting. I would just say, just as a general DM thing, though, is you should never feel like you're in an adversarial place
Yeah.
or characters.
Yeah.
You know, your goal is to move the story along. And I think that's a common mistake that bad DMs make, where you're like, we're going to siege the castle, roll, roll, roll. No, you're not. And then everybody just sits there, you know?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that suspension. You're trusting people with that suspension of disbelief, and you're also in the leadership position. And somebody said it, the word, and I love that word because I almost want to explore what this feels like. Because I think as DMs, you're not just navigating the table, you're navigating the story. And there's a lot, people come in and sit at the table. You'll get different people of all different backgrounds, all different beliefs, and you're sitting there together, sharing something. And somebody said the word conflict. And I think that's an interesting thing to explore. I think a lot of people are afraid at the table of conflict, especially if you're playing a character and something conflicting happens and it doesn't go the way you expect. And then as a DM, you're navigating what that conflict looks like. In storytelling, I think conflict is so rich. If you do it correctly, as long as you kind of sink into it. Does somebody else? Yeah, somebody's saying yes. If you want to, I want to throw it to whoever's yesing because I want to explore this.
Here's what I love about conflict. Conflict is depth, right? Conflict is stakes, and conflict doesn't have to be like, I'm gonna fight you.
Yeah.
Right? It can be like, I am motivated to help people, and my team member is motivated by money, and that's a thing that we have to kind of deal with as we move forward, right? And the thing that I love about playing D&D, and like I think it ties a lot of this stuff back together, is like at any given time it should be at least two levels going on, right, in your thinking, where on one level you're the character or the DM or like the NPCs in the scene, right? And also on another level you're the like construction workers building the game and building the scene, right? So your character might be frustrated because they've come up against a roadblock that they have to overcome, but you as the player love it because it gives you something to push against and something to create against, right? And I think as the DM, that's what you're always trying to think is like, I want them to do this, but maybe this NPC doesn't want them to. So I can create conflict and have them, while still facilitating them moving forward, but the NPC is like saying, I'll get you, I'll stop you. But me as the DM is saying, and here's that secret passage you were looking for, you know, like, and so the conflict isn't you trying to stop them from doing anything. It's you making it more sweeter when they succeed. You know what I mean? Like, because if it was like every door is unlocked, that's not fun. That's not fun to play, right?
Yeah, I try to, because as I'm a non-confrontational, avoid conflict kind of person probably in general, but I try to reframe the idea of conflict as problem solving, because problem solving is fun. Like a lot of us do that, or at least I do, as like a fun activity, right? So it's much more about like, how can I place obstacles in their way? And the fun of it is, what's the solution? And I don't even have to know what that solution is. I can just present it, and then if they come up with something really cool, I'm like, great, that DC just went down 5 because that is an amazing idea and I want you to be good at it, you know?
I love that reframing.
That is my favorite thing.
So cool.
I love that when especially it happens a lot in like conversational scenes where like you're planning to do all of these like, oh, you're gonna have to like do this deception check and like this insight, but they like frame the conversation in such a way that you're like, yeah,
that worked.
Okay, you nailed it.
Absolutely.
I don't think you need to roll because that was just a great point that everyone would agree with. Like, you convinced me.
I think conflict is opportunity, right? You could just be a bunch of adventurers in a town drinking, which is fun, but that's just you hanging out with your friends. And when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, there is a hero complex that we all have. And the story that we're telling is, how can we level up as the heroes that we are? So the conflict is obstacle, which feeds opportunity, which feeds story. And you're constantly trying to level up and constantly trying to move forward. So you've got this spinning wheel that needs to be moving. But if you don't have obstacle, conflict, whatever you want to call it, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Can I say
true.
something? Can I say something about improv real quick that is kind of that same? Okay, because I was thinking about this, not to derail us and jump way, way back. But I got this piece of advice from an acting teacher back when I thought I was going to be an actor and got my BFA in acting, which I guess I'm kind of using
Yeah.
now. Not important.
Yeah, definitely.
And the instruction was do what you would do and don't do what you wouldn't do. And
All I heard
and
was
so-
do-do.
do. So that when you're making choices, whether it's in character, like in acting, of like, would your character smash the glass on the ground or set it down on the table? Right? It's like, don't do things. And this is something I had to learn as a player when I first started playing, is like, don't look for like it doesn't make any sense that I'm doing this, but isn't this silly? Like, sometimes that's fun. If that's the character you're playing, then that's what your character would do. But if your character is like really by the book, straight-laced, like bureaucrat, do what they would do. You know what I mean? And so I think in improv, sometimes people will think, I have to come up with the most creative choice. And it's like, no. And same with like DMs, right? Where it's like, well, they did something. I have to come up with a creative way to say no or yes or whatever. And it's like, no, just, okay, yeah, great. Do the next thing that you would do. Like you just got set on fire. You're probably going to put that fire out. You don't need to like,
Yes,
it's
reinvent
motivation.
the wheel.
Exactly. It's the motivation.
What is a motivation?
Right.
Also, on top of that motivation, because within conflict, you find that, right? You kind of, I like problem solving. Within problem solving, you find that. And it's interesting because I think that there's a new sort of pacing. D&D, 5th edition, there's a lot of tools at your disposal to do a game, like heavy mechanic game, or do a more storytell-driven, free-form improv sort of style game. And there's everything in between, which is exciting to dive into that arena nowadays. Oh, sorry, BJ? Yeah?
I was just gonna say, to Deborah's point before, some people want that crunch. Some people want to get out the minis and the graph paper and calculate movement in cover and all that. I am not that dude. I'm there to tell a story. And when we did Vampire LA by Night, there's whole episodes where we never rolled dice. I mean, it's basically a soap opera. And Jason's philosophy with his storytelling, Jason Carl, is that I'm here to represent the world of darkness and what it demands. That's it. That's what I'm here to do. In regarding the conflict thing, all storytelling is conflict. People say drama's conflict, but everything's conflict. Comedy is conflict. Tragedy is conflict. Two people have to want something. Like Satine was saying, everybody has to want something, even if it's a glass of water. It's that push and pull against the things. And to Travis's point about do what you would do, realize like things with like villains, for instance. To the villain is the hero of their story. The villain's having a great time, doing the thing that they believe is right, and you have to play that out when it is coming forward. And I will just say one other thing, that this is kind of a pet peeve of mine that I've been talking a lot about lately.
Yes, pet peeves. Yes, pet peeves. I love pet peeves.
Intelligent creatures should act like intelligent creatures. Anytime you're like, they do that because they're an orc. I'm like, well, that's just being lazy. I'm like, they have a motivation. Maybe it's hunger, maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear. If they take the time to tell you that a creature's intelligent and has a language, try and talk to them. They got things to say. You may or may not reach a diplomatic solution, but not necessarily every conflict has to be resolved with murder hobo-ishness. Not every time.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And to flip it, because I'm like, well, what happens nowadays? They're called, I think, beach episodes. And you kind of don't do any conflict, and it's literally justification episode for your players, where essentially there's a session dedicated to their R&R, whether it be a spa day at the beach.
Downtime.
Or, downtime.
I am such a sucker for like backstory and character work, and okay, and this is people at home. You might be going, no, Travis, but I think that so much character work and backstory and stuff, that comes up in downtime. You know what I mean? Like when you're doing the job, fighting the monster, you're not going to pause and be like, oh, by the way, I never met my dad. Yeah. Like, no, you're right in the middle of like fighting the dragon. And so sometimes you have to have a campfire scene. You have to have like, we're just eating dinner together and like having a conversation. And when it's PCs talking to each other, I'm not going to make them roll for shit. Yeah. you know, I don't know if I can curse. Sorry. I'm just going to let him talk. You know what I mean? And like, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, is he telling the truth? You better roll insight.
No, yeah, I never make
chat.
PCs roll against each other. That's just, if you try to convince someone, that it's on your actual merit. But this is interesting. So I love Travis, and that's a fantastic. Just for the flip side of that, and as the weird, like, hey, general television actress at the table, I should be all like, ooh, character
General
development.
television.
But I'm a big believer that we define ourselves most by what we do, the actions that we take.
Mm-hmm.
We can have all kinds of stories about who we think we are, but when it comes to the moment that we step up to the plate and do something, that's what really says this is who I am and what I'm willing to put on the table. So like an amazing example. So I generally like to have story told through action, not a lot of sitting around talking about backstory. If someone's backstory, I want to know. So I usually have my players send me a short paragraph, just a little bit about what they want to play with. And I will find a way to insert that into a moment of action. Because, and a great example for me is in Relics and Rarities. So Xander had this incredible backstory as Ricky, and he was all kind of like about money, and that was more important to him than his comrades. But in a moment, Xander/Ricky, chose to step in front of the barbarian, and our druid gnome stepped in front of our orc barbarian and took a hit of mummy rot for her. And to me, that says more about who Ricky is than any story he could tell us about his past. So
Yes.
That's important to me, just to make sure that we follow our gut, we trust ourselves, and we make actions in story that are incredible, and let that the story of your character is a present tense story, not a past tense story. And you can let that past tense story inform what you do present tense, but that we try to spend most of our time living it rather than remembering it or thinking about it. So I mean it. That's not to discount what Travis said. Everyone is
No. I want to say real quick,
Yeah.
Deborah is much smarter than me because you said it way better, right? Because the thing that I love is you get backstory, and
Yeah.
backstory is like who the character thinks they are,
Yes.
right? And then we see the actions they take and how they've changed from being on this adventure, or
Yes.
being with these people, and the choice. And so, like, having the backstory of like, this is who I am, these are the things I've been through, and it's like, you're not your past, you're not your history.
Yeah.
You're the things that you choose to do in this moment. Give those so much more reverberation.
Totally.
It's like, I'm a sucker for it in a TV show. When it's just like, oh man, we'll never get along. And then like 10 episodes later, they're best friends. And I'm like, this is what I want. And so seeing that of just like, man, are these players ever going to get along? And then they're taking shots for each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's all I want.
Yeah.
That's my soul fire.
I don't want to give away too much of what happens on Pirates, but Brennan did a fantastic job of setting us up for those moments.
Ooh, yeah, Brennan.
Well-
Actually, how do you? Because I know you do balance conflict and sort of pacing of like downtime very well. You probably have a style on that. I love the fact that we all have different styles. That's amazing that we all choose to do very different things with backstory or storytelling within that.
I first of all find myself completely anxiety ridden just in this round table because everyone's saying such smart stuff and the time is flying. I feel like in the past 10 minutes, 20 different topics got introduced that I could spend a whole day talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm over here like,
Yes.
an embarrassment of riches, no!
Can we all just
like,
stay on after and keep going? Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll just keep talking.
I'm learning so much. I love it.
I know it's truly well, and I think too that anyone watching this that maybe feels intimidated by being a dungeon master, I think that you should take so much heart from that moment, not of disagreement, but of two different styles being offered up. That should always be very encouraging to anyone watching. And I hope you start, if you have a desire to start DMing in your heart, because the fact that two people who are pros and masters of this skill can have two different points of view should be encouraging because it suggests that this is an art form, meaning that these differences are stylistic and there is no one true path, right? There is one truth that there are many roads to arrive at, and that should be really heartening to everyone listening. What I would say, there's so much good stuff that was said. I love Deborah. Oh no, Deborah just said this really great thing. It was such a diplomatic way of being like, talk is cheap, kid. Put your money where your mouth is, which I love, and I think it's very true. But it's all. I think that we should be very aware in general, because there are so many different styles, of false dichotomies. Dice and crunch are not the opposite of storytelling. Yeah. You can very much have your cake and eat it too. If someone says, what do you like, role playing or numbers? What do you like, optimization or emotions? My answer is always yes. That's my choice. I like all of it. And I would say, weirdly, this is maybe introducing a new topic, but one of the things that guides me in terms of where I think the numbers and the graph paper and the dice and the game marry and conflict, because what dice and the numerical mechanics of a game system allow you to do is introduce real conflict. And the reason I say that is I am a big old softy, and my players tend to figure out pretty quickly that I want them to succeed, which, if we are not using a mechanical system, can completely sap all of the risk from this, unless I have to use a kind of old expression, like a good cop, bad cop situation, yeah. Right? So there's an element of being like, hey, when I say roll initiative, I have let go of the reins, yeah. And now the system is running things, yeah. And the system didn't get invited to your last birthday party and didn't crash on your couch for a week when he moved to LA, right? Like that's like important that there is this rough customer of the system there to do this. But what I would say, this is maybe interesting, a new topic, is the reason I love that real risk and the system getting its say is because it introduces real emotion, risk, sadness, loss, catharsis. And this is an interesting storytelling thing that I want to voice, which is when you are playing, I think there's two big differences. Some DMs run their tables such that every PC is also a storyteller, and I think that's beautiful and great. The one thing that I want to say about myself is, on the rare occasion where I get to be a player, sometimes I am not looking for imagination as much as I am looking for immersion. And in other words, like, the little kid reading fantasy books in me says, no, like when I'm DMing, I always have to imagine stuff. Let me immerse, let me live in the world of the story. I understand that I will have an instinct in the right moment to make the good story choice, but I want to be in the character's world, living and trying to survive, making optimal choices. So I often think of that when I'm DMing, where it's like, I don't want to foist storytelling responsibility on my players. Rather, it's almost like if you look at a rat going through a maze trying to get cheese. I don't want to put the responsibility of a cool maze run on the rat. I want the rat. Does that make sense?
All right, rat, impress me.
Impress me with your maze running skills. To me, I want to allow the rat the joy of trying to get the cheese as hard as it can.
Yeah. I gotta say too, I totally agree with that immersion element. I gotta say, as a player at Satine's table, she is, girl, you are just an amazing immersive storyteller. You build the world around you. You add in elements. You create sounds, and like, I think with immersion, that's definitely something that's important in your style of DMing. I've noticed that playing at the table with you, and it's
well, you guys respond, right? So it's not just me. I'm kind of just showing you the mental visualization of what's happening, but then you are the one that's like, I'm going to try to reach that scroll way up high, but the dust is getting in my eyes. So that immersion kind of, you guys are a part of it. You know, often I think about, you're in a tavern. What does that mean? I don't have to tell you every little thing that's in the tavern, but if I say, you know, you're in Baldur's Gate and you're in a tavern, there's a baseline understanding that there's probably going to be 3 bar fights in the first 5 steps into the thing. You know, someone's trying to pick your pocket, so you're going to move your wallet. You know, there's this other understanding about when you're playing in these games where as a dungeon master, you have to understand what you have to tell the players and what you don't have to tell the players.
Yeah,
And overdoing it
that's
can
so
be more
important.
like you're telling them too much stuff and then they get overwhelmed. But if you tell them just enough stuff, then they're a part of it. Like if you're in a bar fight, Kelly, if you're in a bar fight.
I have been in
You
so
know.
many bar fights with you. It's great. I love
Like,
it.
I don't have to tell you there's a pitcher on the table or a big turkey on a platter. You might come up with that on your own. And I, as a dungeon master, want to gift you your knowledge of taverns and dinner time to utilize that in the games to create more fun and more story. So I think going back to, and Brennan, everything you said, yes, also, and yes. Immersion is the playfulness, the back and forth between everybody, that everyone gets to participate in their surroundings. And then when they get to a point that they're too scared to add any more things and kind of look at the dungeon master and go, what else is happening? What else can I participate in?
Yes, and it looks like B Dave might have thoughts on this. I love his finger up. Like you're like I'm digging it. Like as somebody who's like, and B Dave calling upon as a moderator upon my.
I
my
just
student.
know I'm loud and I try not to trample people. That's all. So I just yes, if I might. A few things to. I agree with everything everybody said. I say when it comes to the descriptive stuff. A lot of times I would say less is more when it's saying something like, it's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. To each of you, that's something else. You know, the moment you're like, oh, she's a 6-foot blonde, it's like, well, I like short girls and redheads. You know, you've lost some people, you know, versus just being like, it's a monstrous hulking beast. You know, like, and they will fill in the gaps there. It is, remember, a collaborative art. You know, it's like you are telling the story together. And to Brennan's point, a lot of times I find I will toss it to the characters to tell me something when it's something cool, you know?
Yeah.
You've defeated the monster.
Yeah.
You tell me what that looks like, you know? And then they get to be excited. And the last thing I would say, because I know we don't have a ton of time, this is a speech I have to give. Like Brennan was saying, you know, if you're thinking about DMing, do it. Yeah, if you're thinking about DMing, do it. You know, get some dice, get your friends, get D&D Beyond. That's everything you need, and just tell a story and have some fun. This is an opportunity for you all to live your mythology. And people talk about this Matt Mercer effect, which I know he hates. When you're like, oh, but I can.
I thought you were gonna say people talk about this Matt Mercer guy. I don't know.
Man, it's dumb hair. No, yeah, sorry, Internet. I love him dearly. Matt Mercer, I love you. I shall hearken unto you soon. But really, people are like, oh, I can't do what Matt does. I can't do what Travis does. I can't do what Deborah does. I can't do what any of us do. Guess what? You can't at all. You cannot do what I do at all. But I can't do what you do.
Yeah.
We can't tell your stories. And your story is innately valid, and your story needs to be told. So holding back, you're not, and this is true of all art, all expression, you holding it in isn't helping anybody. We're in the darkest timeline, y'all. We need all the joy and beauty possible. Get your friends together, roll some dice, tell some stories, write your books, write your scripts, do whatever. It can be done. Let your light shine and don't even try it. Like, take what we're telling you and take from it what you can utilize and apply that. Like Bruce Lee said, you know, take what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is distinctly your own. Tell some stories. Have a good time.
B-Dave,
I love that.
B-Dave, you embody...
Tina, so much. We're all so excited.
B-Dave, I'm so fast. B-Dave, you embody my vision of what the perfect, like, high school teacher would be.
I agree.
I needed you.
We're inspired. We're all going to college.
We're going to state. We're going to win the championship.
I gotta say, like, please, Travis, if you have thoughts.
Oh no,
I'm just
I was gonna add to that, and so I think the thing is, like, I am as a player, I like to be part of the storytelling, right? I think Brandon will tell you when I played on Tiny Heist, I was like, oh, I want to have a scene like this, and I want to do something like this, and like this, like, because I tend to really fall in love with the players I play. Like as the characters I play, I love them very dearly, and so like I have big plans for them. But I think a lot of this, one of the most important things you can do as a DM is to talk to your players and ask them what they want, right? Because I think the only thing that determines whether or not you are a good DM is if your players are having a good
Yeah.
And like, this is a thing of like, just recently I was having a conversation with my brothers and my dad, like, you know, we're, you know, a ways into doing Adventures on Graduation now. What do you guys think? And like, one of the things is I was trying to be like, not so like scripted in the story. Like I was not, you know, I would let them walk in the room and then them figure out what to do. And they were like, oh no, we like it better when it's kind of clearer what is about to happen in the room. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can do that. I didn't want to get in your way. And they're like, no, and it compared it to, I think Justin, of course, compared it to Sleep No More, which we have both seen numerous times. And I think he's been to like 12 times because it's a great show. But the way Sleep No More, which is this like interactive theater experience in New York, the way it works is you're just kind of walking around in the space. It's like this 5-story building and you're moving throughout the different floors and the different rooms. And when a scene is about to happen, out of the corner of your eye, you'll see like the lights come up in a room and maybe the music gets louder from your right. And you'll be like, huh, that's interesting. What's that? And so you'll move towards it. But nobody's coming up to you and saying like, hey, a scene is about to happen in that room, right? It's just all the cues are there to let you know, huh, something interesting is probably going on over to my right if I want to wander over there. And like, that is the thing that I'm going to try to work more on as a DM is like, I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you, but I do want to make it obvious which way you're supposed to go. And
I love that vulnerability.
There.
I love that because like sometimes DMs, like especially as professional DMs, you know, on in this space, folks, you know, don't realize or recognize we are I am trying every day to grow and learn. And I know I have areas I want to work on too. Like it takes, you know, we're all people just walking through this life and there's so much being offered to us every time, every year as the world changes. And I think that there's, you know, you always want to keep growing as a DM. And I love, Travis, that you're exploring that part and being like, I want to keep leaning in on this section unapologetically.
Well, and I got started on it so late. Like, I know so many DMs that, like, they started DMing when they were, like, 13, and they've been doing it forever. And it's like, oh, man, I got a lot of catching up to do. And, you know, and to bring it all back, like, you learn through failure. You know, you learn through things not working. And so, like, if you're worried about starting to DM because you don't think you'll be perfect at it, like, of course you won't. You've never done it before, and you will screw up. And then you will kind of find your style, and you'll find the things that work for you through the mistakes that you make. And there's kind of two ways, much like in like crit fails, right? And failing on the dice, there's two ways that you can respond to it. You can either quit, or you can go like, oh, but you know what that does make me think of? Oh, you know what I'm going to do next time that I think will make that work, right? And like I think B. Dave, you said it sooner, fail forward, right? It's like you move forward, not like in spite of your mistakes, but because of them. That is how you grow, and that's how you learn and stuff. It's like, well, that failed so spectacularly that I can see now what I'm definitely not going to do.
Can I share with you guys a thing that's changed my whole, like the way my players play at my table? And it seems to really loosen everybody up.
Share it, Sage, please.
Yeah, if you roll a 1, especially on an attack roll, I want you to roll the damage and then tell everybody at the table how you hit yourself. And it's really like people go, what? Their imaginations on how they hurt themselves are way worse than what I would do. And this is part of the like rolling for story and the magic of Dungeons and Dragons is like suddenly we're all focused and everyone is okay with stumbling. And then also everyone's focused on that person and they want to help them. So it's no longer like player versus dungeon master. It's everybody reacting to one another.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions to use as a DM, which is, what does that look like? And what does that look, especially when someone's trying to do something just absurd, right? Where it's just like, okay, you're flipping off of what and swinging onto what? Okay, you tell me exactly how that's supposed to work, and let them describe the whole thing, how they think it's going to work, and then have them roll. And then you describe how it actually goes. It's one of my favorite, like, that's the fun, right?
So
it's like,
fun.
I've got this whole plan. Okay, you failed, so here's what actually happened.
like everything kind of generates from those spaces. Like every track you lay down is a place or a tool for your players to interact and explore. Every single time you react as a DM and explain something to them, that is, like somebody said earlier, an avenue. They might go down that corner. I think it was really interesting, Travis, you brought up something like Sleep No More, which is an immersive theater event, bringing it back to kind of improv and storytelling. I think this is a really interesting time, and I'm acknowledging that. I think we can all agree, as B-Dave said, darkest timeline in some ways. But
Wait, is something happening? What is that? I've been in my panic room this whole time. I
Right.
might have missed.
Stay in the bunker.
What's going on?
Remain
Okay.
in the bunker, Travis.
I think there's been such a beautiful catharsis within D&D and storytelling, and the power that you can have right now within your own head. Right now, we
yeah.
can't go out and we can't go to sleep no more. We have to be diligent. We have to take care of one another. But we can all connect. We can all dial in right now, and we can tell a story together. And that's what's so interesting right now, is that I feel like D&D is, for those who are hesitant or nervous to DM, there is an area where if you're feeling scared or nervous, like D&D can be a tool right now, not just a play, not just a thing where you're rolling dice, but like it can give you catharsis. It can make you feel like you're walking outside of your room. I don't know if you've all felt that way, but
Well, we're literally in a trauma state. And so I study a lot of PTSD and healing from that. One of the things that they say is there's a book called When the Body Keeps the Score. And they say, go do stage theater, go do improv, work with a group. And the whole thing is working together to accomplish stuff on a weekly basis or on a regular basis, so that you know the value of who you are and what you have to offer. So when you're sitting at the gaming table, you are doing that. And luckily, we're not sitting at a table anymore. We could be playing D&D every day. Some people do.
Yeah.
I know,
Sometimes it feels like we are. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And that's and unlocking that part of your head, being able to explore things that are just as real as going out and seeing theater with a group of folks. Like when you're at the table and you're DMing and your players slay that dragon, like Brennan and I actually talked about this during our chat, you know, it's as real as anything. Like you slaying that dragon, you're going out and you are slaying that dragon, and that is imprinted into a moment with people collectively. And I think
psychologically, that is 100%. You can make an entire year worth of story that will overcome, you know, a traumatic event, and you're replacing these bad memories. So almost the more you play D&D, the better off and more well-adjusted that you eventually will be able to become after this.
Well, and it's amazing the things that you can kind of address and in some ways process with just a little bit of removal, with a little bit of distance. It's like there were things that happened, specifically thinking about In Balance, which was our first Adventure Zone arc, where it was like after like we'd finish these big scenes where I'm like, huh, that's also kind of what I'm going through with this thing. I didn't even, I'm kind of dealing, because like we were playing it like when I think all of our firstborn kids were born during this time. And so like there was a lot of that was happening. And like I got diagnosed with like depression, like right in the middle of doing Balance. And like there was all this stuff that was like kind of coming into the game, not on purpose, just because like what was in my head. And then like we'd finish a recording session and I'd just be sobbing and just be like, man, we really dealt with some stuff today. That was great. We did it.
I've had that come up a lot on my Patreon, because of a World of Darkness Patreon, where the game's been going for about a year now. And it's so many people, especially Vampire, it's easier because it's this world. And so many people like almost unintentionally kind of dug some stuff up and ended up like resolving traumas that they didn't know. And I like one of the things that in general I find whenever I have parents, I make a point that I always make parents cool. Like unless it's expressly their story that their parents are uncool, I always make parents cool. And we were doing one that it just so happened it was like a time traveling, Umbra spirit thing, and one of you, as one does, and one of the characters went back and met his father, who his father was dead, but he went back and he was talking to him, and right before he left, the father was like, "I'm proud of you, son." And and they left. And the person messaged me afterwards and was like, my real dad never said that to me ever. And just
Wow.
hearing that, like, it like really elicited like a real thing in another human being. And once you and that's the to Satine's point, that's the joy of immersion. When you really put on this mask and allow yourself to be in this place, then yes, you feel emotions that are just as real and just as valid as anything else. And that is why a lot of times tabletop is a good tool for therapy and healing. Like a shout out to Clinical Role, shout out to Dr. Janina Scarlett, shout out to Dr. Megan Carroll, shout out to Game to Grow, all these places that are using these tools to, like Travis said, just take one step away. It's not you, but maybe this orc barbarian Roll maybe drinks too much because he's hurt about, his unresolved trauma from the Bay. Yeah, maybe. Like, well, why do you think that guy does it? And it is a way to very healthily, genuinely work through things. And
It is very cathartic. Very.
But also take care of yourself. Go slow. Be careful.
Yes. Yeah,
Be gentle
don't
with
rush
yourself.
into
This
that.
is, I don't think any of us would suggest you suddenly go make a game specifically to address with all of your things. But if you feel like something's coming up in the moment and it feels safe and you want to sort of dip a toe in, we just want everyone to be healthy and safe and happy.
And
Yes,
to that point,
100%.
if you don't feel safe, and you need to step back, that is also
okay.
I to that point, another piece of advice, if you're looking to start DMing, especially if it is like, hey, let's not think about what's going on in the world right now, and instead play D&D for an hour. I make your world inclusive.
Yeah.
Like, if there's magic, people can put people to sleep with spells and like read minds and stuff. Why not trans characters? Like, you're having it like as strange as it sounds, a great example is like Schitt's Creek, where it's like, it doesn't matter where it's set. No one has a problem with the fact that these two guys are in love, right? It's just everyone accepts it and it's fine. Make your world like that, right? The conflict doesn't need to come from that.
Yeah.
The first stream I ever did, Theogony and Kairos, I was talking to Sam DeLev. This is like, it was 3 years ago, but it feels like it was 40. And Sam is non-binary, and they wanted to play a non-binary character. And I was like, well, in the world, should other people comment on that or ask questions? And they said no, because I expect my fantasy world to be better than this one.
Yeah.
I was like, transmission received. Yeah.
And that's really what this is all about too. It's a game. It can be a tool. It can be so many different things. Be delicate with yourselves and take care of yourselves. We are all recognizing that storytelling is a powerful tool, and sitting around the table and trusting one another, it's a powerful thing. It can be cathartic. There can be expectation, but removing those sort of barriers to entry and just like going forward together and taking that leap of faith in one another. I think that's such a beautiful thing. We can paint the worlds we literally want to see, per Travis's point. You guys, that's pretty much us. We're right on the tip of the time here. I feel like we've had such a wonderful conversation. I would love to talk all day about this, and I hope we can continue it at some point. Wonderful news for those watching currently. At the end of this panel, we have a panel with somebody in this actual panel DMing a game. It's the D&D epic titled The Great Knucklehead Rally. So I would recommend you go check it out. DM'd by Brennan Lee Mulligan. The players are Chris Perkins, Liam O'Brien, amazing, Jody Hauser, Woot Woot, Gurav Gulati, Bria Ningar, and Carlos Luna, an amazing, amazing group of players. Go watch.
I better go get ready. I'm gonna go read this adventure real quick. I think I have a minute or two. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna jump in. This is so wonderful.
This is so fun.
Brilliant people. This was so cool.
Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a great rest of your D&D celebration.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.